Well, good afternoon, everybody. There's a lot of you out there by the looks of it. So thank you very much for coming to our seminar, which will be an interesting presentation given some of the comments about consultants and trust fundraising from our funders this morning. But hopefully we can share some value with you today about preparing successful applications to Christian grant-making trusts. My name is Andy Hield, my colleague Alison Glasspool. We represent Yeomans. Yeomans is a full-service marketing and fundraising agency currently working with around 120 charities. Yeomans has a heart for and specialist experience serving the Christian sector and a real passion to actually be part of the teams of the clients that we work with. And I think that's something that has come across in our nature of our successful applications, and hopefully we'll deliver some of that value this afternoon. I'm a fundraising consultant, having worked with 180 organisations or so, developing fundraising strategies across individual campaigns, major donor, trust work as well with my colleague Alison. Alison.
Hiya, I'm Alison Glasspool, and for the last 4 years I've worked with Yeoman's leading and developing the grant-making trust work for the organisation. I've worked almost 20 years in the charity and community sector in various capacities, which included fundraising, operational management, policy development, allocating grants, as well as obviously making grants. Alongside Yeoman's, this has included 8 years with a children's charity called Spurgeon's, doing a lot of youth and community work, and also 5 years with the UK and Ireland team at Tier Funds, where we allocated funding. At Yeoman's, I lead the grant-making trust consultancy work with a number of small and medium-sized charities. Most of them are Christian charities, and they work either in the UK or internationally.
Thank you. Well, we know there's probably like to be represented a whole variety of you this afternoon, I guess mainly from Christian charities, perhaps some representatives of churches as well. There'll be small, some medium, some large organisations. We hope our presentation will give you some benefit and something to take away with you. We'll be presenting our keys to successful applications, followed by hopefully 15 to 20 minutes of questions as well and answers. So do please get your questions ready, and we've got some live case studies as well. So, in good style, we have not 12, but to take a leaf from Peter Kerridge's notes and about being concise, we have 6 keys to preparing successful applications to Christian grant-making trusts. And here on the screen are our 3 core takeaways for you to have this afternoon, along with some other practical tips. They are characteristics of Christian trusts, how to present your case for support, and what makes a successful application. We will, of course, look at trusts as a donor audience. You know, they are people as well as corporate givers, and some other key elements to your successful approaches. So our first key is to understand the characteristics of Christian trusts. There's a wide depth and breadth of Christian giving organisations out there. They each give at different financial levels and with different sizes of administration and management teams, which can make the approach that you make different. Of course, we also saw and met some of the representatives from some of the larger organisations this morning, Joseph Drank Trust, the Lang Family Trust and Sainsbury. There are other bigger ones, such as Garfield Weston, who have a Christian funding stream within them. And then, of course, who didn't meet this afternoon, but some of you may or may not know, are the smaller trusts, perhaps family trusts, such as Millfield or KP Ladd. Each have a specific criteria about what they want to give and why. That may be focused around their mission focus, such as evangelism or social justice. Important to know when aligning with your own ask. They, of course, will have different expressions of their Christian faith as well, reflecting the rich diversity of the different traditions and denominations of our Christian culture here in the UK. A few examples. Stewards Company Limited and Radstock Trust focuses evangelical, literature, mission and gospel proclamation. The Cadbury Trust you may have heard of, famous family name, a Quaker background, with a real focus in the Midlands area of the UK. There are many Catholic trusts, such as the Edith Bessie Gibson Trust, which gives to the general advancement of the Roman Catholic religion, and where we've had success raising funds for a maritime charity. The Women's World Day of Prayer, again, give to global mission, and again we've had success in aligning an organisation's ask with their own method, with their own mandate to give. Which comes as to our second key, to know what you're asking for. And think about it from the trust perspective. You're sat on the other side receiving the applications, as many of the funders are that we spoke to this morning and heard from. They're asking the question, what do you want my money for? What do you want my trustees' money for? So have you thought about exactly what you're asking for? Because before you start, you've got to know what you're asking for and why, so that you can articulate it clearly, concisely to others. You can have an amazing vision, and I'm sure that we all do. God's work is incredible. But you need to know the nuts and bolts. So if you can identify what you can ask for, and you may need to break it down across various applications, and it could be anything, it just often needs to be articulated well. So to help with this, you need a plan. Alison.
Yeah, this year I've been working with a very brand new charity that's been in the last 3 years forming through various things. It's called Alliance of Town and City Chaplaincies, and they were registered as a charity back in March. They came to us early summer, all enthusiastic. They just wanted us to get going with their grant-making trusts at fundraising. But on meeting them, I felt like we needed to do more in terms of their planning, just getting a good understanding about, yes, they had a fantastic vision. They want to see chaplaincy teams in every town and city across the UK. But it's almost like, what were the nuts and bolts? What was the detail in making that happen? So before we started with the Grant Making Trust fundraising, we worked closely with them, helping them put together a business plan. And with that, we're clear on the resources that they require, what they're potentially going to achieve over the next 3 to 5 years. And to achieve their vision of growing chaplaincies to serve the nation. And what the founder said to me was, there's value in the process, that now we are in the stages of what we're going to be talking about with the rest of the presentation in looking for grant-making trust funds for them.
Thank you. So it's really important to get the foundations right. Before you can make your ask, our third key is to make that clear ask. So we like to think of it in simple terms, actually, the questions you're answering. And I know Genevieve from Henry Smith this morning talked about that, about answering the questions that they will ask. So what is the need? Who will be helped? What is it that you desire to change, and what will the impact be? You can see that vision for change with people and areas that you're working with, communities. Is it a new idea, or is it funding for an existing project? Is it specific or more general? Importantly, what's the solution to the need? What's the best way to address the need and make the right change? And then, critically, why are you the best people to address that need? And that trust is receiving that application. Why are you the people to make that change? In some regards, on their behalf. And what will it cost? Very importantly, you have to know that, and we will be placed under scrutiny. There are some very experienced people who will read these applications and know that they know the price of things. And then what will the impact be? Or what will the perceived impact be? As John Higgs said this morning, Alpha, Cap, they didn't know what the impact was going to be, but they gave it a try. And so if you can, how will you measure that impact as well? So it comes down to our fourth key point, knowing your donors. Who will fund or potentially fund your cause? You can get to know them and identify some information about them. Do the research. Some of you may be doing this already. I don't know the experience level of any of you, particularly in the room. If you don't know, there are some great resources out there with databases of trusts, such as trustfunding.org.uk, which is from the Directory of Social Change, Funding Central from NCVO. Google has some information out there as well, apparently. Annual reports of charities similar to yours will have funders often listed in them as well. You're looking for intelligence about the organisations. You're looking to discover what you can learn about your potential donors. What is it they fund? What don't they fund? Again, snapshot of that earlier today. Is it close to your ask or part of your ask? How much do they give and over what period? If you go in and ask for too much, again, your application may simply be rejected. They may come back to you and say, actually, think about more realistic, but you don't need to take that risk. And what is the application process? Is it 2 sides of A4, for example, or is it an online application? Is there a phone interview? I've been interviewed by trusts in the past when you're kind of getting down to more of a discernment stage, and you get some very detailed questions to answer. And importantly, when you review applications and funding procedures, when do trustees meet? When using the sources you can define your research parameters and do so very clearly, because then you'll be more effective in your research. Search based on who the beneficiary is. It's adults, children, people with disabilities. What's the location? Are you international or are you local? What is your type of project or cause? And what is that the trust funds? Is it education, health, development, evangelism, mission, Bible translation? The list goes on. Are they Christian or do they have some other faith base? Are there more? Sometimes you can use more specific searches, such as Christian social welfare, which will return a list of results. Once you have a list returned in the database of good quality targets and the most appropriate ways to reach them, you can then pull out your Christian ones. They're going to most likely identify with what you do, but don't stop there. Now, it's for a later session for others who are talking about going beyond Christian funding, but we would still look through and see who else can fund the cause, and we advise that you do as well. Then look at them in more detail. What other causes have they previously given to? Look at the Trust's websites, look at their annual reports, see who they've given to, and the GrantNav software and website that John Higgs referred to earlier today, again, is a valuable tool here. You may know somebody, but you may have a personal connection with the Trust as well. Some trusts, as they said this morning, don't like you to go through their trustees. For some, it's the only way you'll get an invitation to apply. And then think about your fundraising administration. Have you got a good database to store the information, a calendar to diarise when your applications need to be sent out so you reach the deadlines, and keeping everything neat and tidy? So what does an application to a Christian trust look like? Some of you may have seen this already, some of you may have achieved success yourselves, others not so yet. Your research will tell you how you should approach the trusts you've identified as most likely to support your cause. You know whether it's going to be a written application or online, and whether it's very simple or whether you're simply answering a series of questions, or if you like, are approaching it in a freestyle way. Written proposals can range from 2, for example, to Joseph Rank Trust, 2 pages, or 10 for the Garfield Weston Foundation. A bit more preparation required there. Most will have a word count and limitation, but again, just to reiterate a point that Genevieve from Henry Smith said this morning, use the space available too. Don't give too little information. And get the language right as well. We're Christians, we have a shared ground, a common faith, and so do be sensitive to how they're expressing their Christian faith as you are your own. What goes in a successful application? Follow the funder's guidelines. It's going to make their life a lot easier as well as your own. Once you've got your case for support and your plan, shaping it to applications is a lot easier and a lot more efficient for you as well. Just a note on guidelines. Not everybody does have guidelines, and if they don't, a 1-page covering letter and a 4-page, if you like, proposal of what you want to achieve is a really good format that we found achieves success. And what you're putting in that proposal are 4 core elements: what the problem is, what the solution is, what your organisation is doing about it, and how the Trust's funding will help. Of course, don't forget that all-important budget and the direct ask. How much is it that you're looking for, and how will it contribute to what you need? Include hard facts, stories, and impact wherever you have it. Even if you think you've got little, use it to help evidence your case. And be relational, wherever that works for the Trust and yourselves. Alison, I know you've got some fantastic live case studies to share with us.
I'm going to give you 2 examples, but I have many more up my sleeve. Through the Roof, a Christian disability charity whose mission is to transform lives through Jesus with disabled people. They're approximately £300,000 in size, and that's one case study. A second case study is Papua Partners. I've been a trustee of them since they founded 12 years ago, and they work in West Papua, Indonesia, to tackle injustice with an annual turnover of £70,000 to £80,000 a year. Firstly, so Through the Roof, they came to us for consultancy support towards the end of last year, early this year, having had not much success in trust fundraising. They asked us to work with them on their Joseph Rank application, which they'd been invited to apply, having been awarded Silver Award from the Christian Funders Forum last year, which again, you heard the fundraisers sort of took the trust sort of recommend you perhaps applying to them for your project to be considered. So we worked with them to apply for a role for their Roof Breaker network, which is about making churches inclusive for people with disability. That's both physical changes, but very importantly, cultural changes in terms of including people with all disabilities to be fully a part of church life and community life. So we were successful in the application to them, and they're actually currently advertising for their church inclusion coordinator role, which the funding was for. It's live at the minute, so if you know anybody that might be interested in that role, do have a look on the Through the Roof sort of website. So alongside the Joseph Frank work, we've also done fundraising using a very similar process to what we've just heard for their Wheels for the World programme. And again, that's seen success, potentially more so in the secular funding stream of trusts than Christian ones at the moment, but it's still very early days. So my focus is obviously Joseph Frank, and we've obviously heard from John Hicks this morning. And on the slides, you can see the Joseph Frank Trust, is their website, and how to make an application is there. We applied for match funding for their church inclusion coordinator to lead the development of the Roof Breaker network. In applying, we specifically followed the guidelines as set out on the website. This involved compiling a 2-page proposal and sending the covering letter and financial information and accounts that were specifically requested as set on the website. On reading the application, John, who we've heard this morning, contacted Through the Roof to arrange a face-to-face meeting. This took place, and the meeting was an opportunity for both John to give feedback on our application and the slight tweaks that we needed to make to make it possible that he could take it to the board. And also for us, as obviously alongside Through the Roof in that capacity, being able to sort of talk in more detail about the Roof Breaker network and its need. Following this, we submitted an updated proposal, taking on board his comments within the timescales that were specified, and it was presented to the board in July. This application, it was successful, but it does still have conditions attached to it. They've secured £10,000 per year for 3 years, and it's subject to getting match funding, which we're very close to hearing on a couple of avenues that we're extremely hopeful about, and also appointing to the role that I've just done a quick promotion for within the 6 months of being secured. So by the end of January, hopefully everything's in place and the funding is released. So that's kind of an example of applying to one specific Christian trust. Also, this Through the Roof has been very enthusiastic about the support that they've received, because prior to us working with them, they hadn't really had any success. And for a small piece of work for us, we've actually been able to generate quite a large income for them, for the size of their charity. The second example, PAPRA Partners, as I said, it's a charity I've been involved with as a trustee since it founded 12 years ago. It's a small international charity employing 2 development advisors working long-term in West Papua to capacity build Indigenous Christian organisations to tackle injustice and poverty in the remote highlands of Papua, Indonesia. Each year, the charity's had to raise between £70,000 and £80,000 to sustain the work. Part of this income has come from Christian grant-making trusts from both the UK and the US. In the UK, for several years, we have secured grants from the Suter Charitable Trust. I don't know, Brian Suter, he runs Stagecoach. He's a strong evangelical Christian with he regularly gives to Christian charities for social action work. For several years now, PAPRA Partners have gone to Suter Charitable Trust, and each year we've secured between £7,500 and £15,000 from them, which for a £80,000 charity, that's quite a significant grant. Initially, we just followed their guidelines, which again is on the website, on the slide that we've got. And they want a 2-page proposal. You send it to their grant manager, Dion Jude, and they meet sort of more or less. Most months they have a funding round, so you hear quite quickly on applying to them. And in most cases we've gone to them, we've been successful. And before submitting our next application, we've gone back to them with a report on how we've spent their money from the previous year, plus putting a fresh proposal to them. However, we've been in a really fortunate position in the last couple of years to establish a dialogue and a personal connection with one of the trustees of the Suited Charitable Trust. So that when we make an application to them now, not only do we follow the process, we always contact this individual, and they obviously know that when they're meeting to discuss the applications, that they know what we're seeking funding for. Last year, we packaged it as a project, but really it was unrestricted funding for us. It was the salary costs of our development advisors. And we ultimately received £15,000 unrestricted funding. And what was quite funny was the trustee came back to us really apologetic, saying, we really wanted to give you more money, but actually we didn't have any more money in that pot at that funding round. So to have that kind of feedback was really helpful. And we're at the stage of we're going back to them. The development advisors are going to meet with this trustee in early December with a fresh proposition for which we're hopeful that by both sustaining and developing this relationship, but also making an application using the processes that they have, that we'll continue to receive a sizable grant, and hopefully that this will follow year on year.
Thanks, Alison. I think that goes to show what the value of building relationships is. Not every trust is going to want to support you, perhaps on an ongoing basis. Many out there don't want to be the sustainable lifeline for you. They want to see that you are developing your own levels of sustainability, but will perhaps invest in you to make that happen and get you started, or start something new with you. But it is important to build relationships. And as you can see, the fruitfulness of that could be incredible for you. You've got some amazing missions that you're doing out there with wonderful vision to see change and to see the kingdom come in our nation and others. And other people will want to get behind that and get excited by it as well. So report back. Say thank you. An organisation, a homeless charity in Brighton that I was a trustee for a number of years, we had a policy there of phoning and saying thank you. And the amount of times the trust said, nobody does that. It's not. I know we're limited in resources, but it's a wonderful thing to be able to do, and share the reward in that, and then show the impact. Many will stipulate how that they want impact shared, and perhaps a time frame within it. Others won't. Some not at all. But if you can, do go back and say that, or do what Alison did in that example, and show the impact was made to go on to the next stage. It's worth understanding how organisations like to partner if they do so. Will they give ongoing support? And do they want a phone call every now and then or an email? And are they going to pray for you? Can you pray for them? We're a praying people, partnering with a God who loves us and wants to see change and wants to see people glorify him, and live lives that are transformed. So there is a prayer communion as well that can happen with some organisations. And then understand how they like to communicate. I won't labour that point. It could be phone, it could be meeting. As again, John this morning said, he will come and visit people's work. And in fact, I had a friend who told me that he once turned up unannounced on her doorstep, and showed her how to fill in the application form to receive £7,500 worth of funding. So there are some amazing relationship possibilities out there. So kind of to summarise as well before we go to some questions, really important to present your case for support clearly, know what you need, the difference it will make, know your donors. Get to know them. Target the approaches carefully. It'll be more efficient and more effective for you too. Do that research. Write strong applications. Follow the funders' guidelines. Answer the questions that they ask. Include what the problem is, what the solution is, what your organisation is doing about it, how the trust funding will help. And again, to reiterate a point that was shared this morning, something you all have that you could all share, or get others alongside who will help you write these applications. Get that passion across. Because that was going to come across in your writing when people read that and say, wow, there's someone who really wants to see this and has such a heart. Build relationships, share the passion, share the vision, follow up, thank, demonstrate impact, talk to people who represent trust if you can, And then manage your approach program. Set yourself realistic goals. It is hard sometimes. It might sound a bit easy saying we've got all these wonderful applications. We can assure you there are plenty that we've never heard back from. Diarise your approaches. Store the information well. Manage it well within the GDPR guidelines that we must subscribe to as well. Manage your internal resources well. If you've got somebody who is good at writing, get them writing. If they're better at presenting, get them presenting. Or if they love a bit of research, channel that well too and maximise your return on investment. I think that's enough for us for the next few minutes at least. And it's time for some questions. I have some very able assistants who will go around with the microphones. If we could ask you to state where your name and where you're from and your question, please, that would be most helpful. We'll take them one at a time.
I'd like to speak, having been a grant manager at one point with Tier Funds. Sadly, they don't still run this funding programme, but our emphasis was the people applying to us. We wanted them to really be on board with the values of us as an organisation and partner. And that meant, yes, they would grow in their organisation, but also they had the potential. We see it with Cinnamon Network now, which is kind of a continuation of what the Tier Fund UK and Ireland team did, where there's that desire to replicate and see, God's kingdom on a broader capacity. So, that was uniquely a Tier Fund model. I'd say I could use, Suter Charitable Trust and potentially Lang as two different examples. Suter, I think when I've applied for specifically mission type things, they've not been, the funding hasn't come back. But when there's been a kind of social development, community development, but with Christian development principles as part of it, that's when the project's been successful. Lang, again, they've got Beatrix Lang and Morris and Hilda Lang. They like the evangelical, but also they do like the social development. Going to another client, we work with Wycliffe Bible translators, and another one that I could name that's also here in the room at the moment, where we've got funding from the Radstock Trust, and they're very much into evangelical Christian literature, proclamation, and by meeting with them in person, it almost opened the door where potentially they weren't willing to fund for various reasons the year before, that's for Wycliffe. By meeting them in person, they actually restarted funding that charity again. So I think it's very important to come back to, it's quite clear, within the Charity Commission, you can look, if they haven't got a website, you can look on their audited accounts and almost how they write their annual report and just the key kind of charities that they give to gives you quite a clear idea of how they express their faith.
I think I'd just like to add to that as well, in that authenticity, be who you are, and so ensure that that you make sure that your Christian identity comes through, and how it comes through. Because if they're not spotting that, they're far less likely to become engaged by it too. There's two ways. I'll start an answer to this if you like, and then Alison, I know, will want to continue. So they want to know. A trust is going to want to know how well you're going to use that money. They want to know that you've got security, and that you know how to use that money. So that's one thing to take into consideration with your ask. They may give large gifts. For example, one organisation was giving one of the charities I work for £100,000, but it was spread as a 30,000-ish a year. So it's a spread. So are you asking for it in one go, or are you asking for it? Do you, how many phases, for example, do you have for your capital appeal and your build process? Is worth looking at. Again, if you're looking to build a relationship with an organisation, they'll maybe want to dip their toe in your water, so to speak, first to see the evidence of how you'll use that. But they may come back and give more. A slightly encouraging time was again for a capital project for a homeless charity in Brighton, where we had written to one trust for 80,000, and it was and this trust only met twice, once every 2 years. Unfortunately, their representative, who did come to visit us, died. We didn't leave their radar. I don't know how it happened. We stayed on their radar, and actually they came back and gave us more. They gave us 100,000 towards our project, based on the strength of the application and the relationship. So, Alison, would you add to that?
That sounds like a good position to be in when they always come back and want to give you more than what you originally asked for. I think I've got probably 3 points to what you're asking. One, it comes back to the research. We know there are a number of trusts that will potentially fund what your building project, what you're wanting to do. But also, you know the amount that you need to fundraise, but you need to find out what are the average size of the grants that they give. So, and again, their Charity Commission or just their information on Charity Commission websites. So, in most cases, you can see the size of the grants. Quite often, they might give, say, two charities a large amount because they're particularly close to their heart, and then those that are newer coming on board. Quite often they're at the lower end, but it's important to build the relationship with that. I think your organisation needs to be able to show that you can manage the large amounts of funds that are coming in. So I think you've got to show that. I mean, I've worked in the past, with a range, from a consultancy perspective, with a range of charities, and it's so important that you get your audited accounts in on time to the Charity Commission, because if it shows up on the website that actually you were 15 days late, that to a trust shows actually they're not that well organised. They've slipped up on their financial accountability. So it's things like that you need to be on the ball as an organisation yourself. And then, I've done a piece of work, I think it was late last year or early this year, with a charity in Oxfordshire where they received funding from Garfield Weston Foundation, and they'd spent that money, they'd done it really well for a couple of years, spent the salary costs, and they wanted to go back to Garfield Weston Foundation for core costs. They'd effectively been invited to do that. So £200,000 charity, and they asked me as a piece of consultancy work, would I look through the application that they'd actually done, and so I went through it, and it was really well written, great English, well presented, all of that. But when I got to the budget and the accounts of what they were asking for, they were effectively asking £75,000 for 3 kind of fundraising management type roles for a £200,000 project, which for me just seemed really, really top heavy. I could see, yes, maybe a £30,000 role, but not 3 roles at £75,000 for the size of the organisation. So that's pretty much what I fed back to them. And that person I worked with was delivering another presentation here today, and he will enthusiastically come up and say that was the best small bit of money that I've spent. We effectively brought £30,000 in as a result of that bit of advice that they'd actually missed. So it's just being real about the size of charity you are and what you're actually taking on board. Because, we've heard from Christians Against Poverty, which I had the pleasure of partnering with them when we were at Tier Fund, and they were a much smaller organisation. Their first application to Tier Fund was for their debt advisory service in Bradford, and we know the story there. They've grown and grown and grown, but it's kind of you can't be running before you're walking. It's a step-by-step process.
That's great. Thank you, Alison.
Yep, I do. As a former Assistant Director of Children's Services with Spurgeon's, we were ingrained, drummed in, safeguarding, child protection safeguarding. Obviously, we're talking about vulnerable adults as well as children in the sad instances that Oxfam and Save the Children and other charities have been involved with. All I would say is, if you're serious about the work that you're doing, get those safeguarding policies in place. We've got what's it, the Church's Advisory Child Protection Charity, is it, if I got it right? CPAS, yeah.
CCPAS.
Yeah, them, yeah. They, from a safeguarding point of view, will be able to give you that advice in terms of how to put a policy in place. Again, going back to times when I worked with TIF, and that was between 2000 and 2005, and that was kind of when child protection was starting to get onto the radar, and we were thinking, our comment was then, the culture's so different. There's no way we can be getting these people. It's perfectly normal for somebody to hit a child, hit a woman, or, all of that. That's in the culture. But actually, it's not acceptable. So, as a charity, you should be advocating that, safeguarding practice, child protection, and there are certainly agencies out there that can be helping with that. And I'd like to add vulnerable adults and child protection, those policies are incredibly similar. Very good question. And again, in my Spurgeon's and TIF capacity, we used to grapple with that very particular question. And I think where we used to the difference between a Christian project and, say, a statutory service was you walk in the journey. The statutory service will engage with them for a time while they need the support, and then once they're better, off they go. And then quite often crisis hits, and then they you have to start working with them again. So I don't think we've totally got the answer, but we've heard about outcomes. Again, I've used this thing called outcomes-based accountability in the past, where you almost come up with key indicators. What are you doing? How well are you doing? And the difference made. So within that, you can come up with certain lines of, yes, I had 20 gospel conversations with so many sort of people, and which is great. But actually, it's almost that relational engagement. If they've got a way of actually quantifying that, actually, we're seeing 4 people on a weekly basis at our drop-in, and you're having meaningful conversations. And then when it comes to the actual difference made, this is where the stories really come in. So-and-so, Christians Against Poverty will say, yes, they got the debt advice, but they've also come to know Jesus at the same time, and, how their lives have changed. And these are, obviously, for Christian funders, these are the really exciting things that they want to hear. So I don't know whether that's answers to your question, but it's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, just as we close, and to add to that as well, I know that we had we had an outreach programme as part of the homelessness work we did in Brighton, and it's still done there. Alpha courses were run. So how many people came on an Alpha course? How many people were part of the Bible study and reading classes as well? How many people went on to become part of churches and things? So there are methods such as that, but you may have to put those programmes in place to do that you may not have now, or you may need to partner with churches, or for example, who do have them, that then you can measure that. It is more work, but then the fruits are there.